We have before us a very experienced and brave opponent, and I must admit a great commander, said Churchill about Erwin Rommel during his speech in the House of Commons. After the French campaign, Rommel became one of Hitler's favourite generals. After receiving the African Corps under his command, he fully demonstrated his tactical genius, his ability to inspire troops, and his ability to use limited resources. For his brilliant actions, he was awarded the Diamond to the Knight's Cross. In 1944, before Rommel, the task was to organise the Atlantic Wall, called upon to reflect the inevitable invasion of Europe by the Allies. However, July 1944 was a fateful month for the Field Marshal. On the 17th of July, Rommel was seriously wounded as a result of a British aircraft attack. He was first taken to the hospital and then to his home for recovery. Within 3 days, the famous unsuccessful attempt was made to assassinate Hitler. Despite not being directly involved in the plot, Hitler's anger fell upon Rommel as well. The task before the leader was not easy. How to destroy the most popular general of Germany so that the German people do not find out about it? The decision was made to force Rommel to commit suicide and announced that his death occurred due to combat wounds. On the last day of Rommel's life, it became known to his son Manfred that he was 15 years old and served as a messenger not far from his home. On October 14th, he was allowed to go home, where his father was recovering. Of course, the family already knew about the suspicions of the Field Marshal and the recent executions. Here is what Manfred tells about his father. I arrived in Gerlingen at 7 o'clock in the morning. My father was having breakfast. I was quickly brought a cup of tea and we had breakfast together. Then we took a walk in the garden. Shortly before 12 o'clock, my father went to his room on the first floor and changed into his favourite African tunic, which he adored because of its open collar. Around 12 o'clock, a car with Berlin plates stopped at our garden gate. In addition to Rommel, there were his aides, Captain Oldinger, a severely wounded corporal, a war veteran, my mother and me. 2 generals got out of the car and entered the house. They were respectful and asked my father for permission to speak with him in private. A few minutes later, I heard my father go upstairs and enter my mother's room. Wanting to know what was happening, I got up and followed him. He stood in the middle of the room with a pale face. Then we went to my room and my father said, "I just had to tell your mother that I'll be dead in half an hour." He was calm, continuing, "It's heavy to die at the hands of your people, but Hitler keeps me in check. But thanks to my services in Africa, I have the right to choose to die from poison. They brought 2 generals with them. Death will come in 3 seconds. If I accept it, nothing will be done against my family. They will also leave my uniform in peace." I interrupted him. "Do you believe this?" "Yes, I believe this," he replied. "It's in their interest. I promised them about your strict silence. If you say even a word, they will break the agreement." I interrupted my father again. "Can't we protect ourselves?" He answered, "There's no point. It's better to die alone than to have all of us killed in a shootout." Then Rommel told Oldinger that he would receive a phone call from the reserve hospital in about half an hour. What should I say? That Marshall had a seizure on the way to the conference? Rommel said, "I have to go. They gave me only 10 minutes." Then he quickly apologized to us again. We helped him put on his leather jacket. Suddenly, he pulled out his wallet. "There's still 150 marks in it. Should I take the money with me?" "No, it doesn't matter, Field Marshal," my father said, carefully putting his wallet back into his pocket. When he entered the hall, his little dog, which he had taken from France a few months ago, barked and ran to him. "Close the dog in the cabinet, Malfred," he said. Then we went out of the house. 2 generals stood at the gate in the garden. We slowly walked along the path and the sound of gravel cracked unusually loudly. The car was already waiting. The driver got out and opened the door for my father, who took the Field Marshal's sword in his left hand and once again shook hands with me and Oldinger before sitting in the car. The 2 generals sat down next to him and the doors closed. My father didn't turn around when the car quickly drove off the hill and disappeared around the bend in the road. When it was all over, Oldinger and I turned around and quietly walked back to the house. 20 minutes later, the phone rang, and my father's death was duly reported. At that time, it was not entirely clear what had happened to him after he left us. Later, we learned that the car had stopped a few hundred meters down the hill from our house in an open space at the edge of the forest. Gestapo officers were watching the area with instructions to shoot my father and storm the house if he resisted. The generals and the driver got out of the car, leaving my father inside. When the driver decided to return, he saw my father fall forward, taking off his cap, and the marshal's baton fell from his hand.